Thank you very much. Am I audible? Am I visible? Okay. Thank you for rushing through your lunch. I know some of you know nothing about the Felix experimental group or know nothing about what I reported on last year, so I'd like to spend just a couple of minutes going through some review material. So the basics of the Felix group is this. This is a group having to do primarily with physical mediumship, the producing of physical phenomena apparently manifesting intelligence beyond the grave. The Felix group was founded in 2004. Originally, they focused on table tilting phenomena. The main cast of characters are the medium, Kai Muge, a well-known cardiologist who functions as the circle leader. His name is Jochen Soderling. That's actually a pseudonym because of his position. He doesn't want people really to know who he is. Both Jochen and Kai are very knowledgeable about and also immersed in the old spiritualist literature, and they also are very well acquainted with the irrelevant theoretical and critical secondary literature. Jochen joined the group in 2007. Kai's wife, Julia, became a regular sitter in 2011. So, in our last episode, oh, that's the obligatory cat picture, sorry. Emerging out of an ectoplasmic cocoon. So in our last episode, I reported, first of all, on my variably controlled seances in Hanau, Germany, where Kai lives, in 2012, and then a series of much more stringently controlled seances held in Austria at a private farmhouse owned by my collaborator, Robert Narholtz, who's somewhere with cameras here, a year ago, May. The Hanau controls included a strip search of the medium, inspection of his clothes, and a quite intrusive four-limb bodily control of the medium during object movements occurring at a distance. And let me just review briefly what the bodily control was. I sat directly to the medium's left. My right leg touched his left leg. My right foot was in front of his left foot. I held his left hand with my right hand for many of the phenomena. And for other phenomena, I also reached across his body and held his wife Julia's hand. She was controlling him from the other side, sometimes holding Kai's hand as well. So in that position, I was literally draped all over Kai while things occurred at a distance and about 50 inches away from him. And the phenomena that occurred during all of that included wraps all around the room, the ceiling and the walls, apparently from behind the thick 16-inch cement walls. Touches, lights moving around the room, object movements on or near the conga drum placed at the far end of the room, shadows on a luminescent plaque, and so on. A number of phenomena were of particular interest. One was a table levitation recorded during a quite informal seance. This was recorded in high-res IR video. And object movements as far as I said, 50 inches from the medium. And what was really interesting about these is that those movements were synchronized with Kai's twitching while I held onto him or clenching. So that's of particular interest for those who think that Kai might have had an accomplice in the room, because nobody except somebody controlling him would have been aware of when the twitches or the clenchings were happening. So only somebody actually in touch with Kai would have had those sensory cues. But things got more dramatic after that, because then the medium extruded a large quantity of ectoplasm from his mouth. It landed in an animated heap on the floor and eventually sprouted a mobile arm and hand, more or less. Now, in Austria, the seances were even better controlled, and there were some general controls that we applied through all the seances. First of all, the seance room was kept padlocked when it wasn't in use. I had sole possession of the key. No one knew where I kept it when it wasn't on my person. The windows and the interior shutters in the rooms each had locks, and they were locked. During the sessions, the room was padlocked from the inside, and the cabinet assembly, all the PK target objects, and all the other objects were examined very carefully both before and after the seances. And in case anyone doubts how carefully we did that, everything was recorded in video. We had a table seance on May 12th of 2013, which included several full table levitations. One of them was captured on video in red light, which was turned on as the table started to rise. It was recorded with a very high ISO and a reasonably slow exposure. Digital enhancement allowed the action and the controls to be seen fairly clearly. And what you see in the pictures is that Kai's feet and those of most of the others were clearly visible on the floor, and Sitter's hands were clearly visible on the top of the table. So let me just quickly show you that table levitation. These are stills from the video. The descent was far more rapid than the rise. We also held a cabinet seance a couple days later. We had already inspected the seance room and the cabinet very carefully, but we did it again 5 minutes before the strip search, and then the room was relocked. So then I strip searched Kai. I carefully examined his shoes and the clothing that we gave him. I followed him to the seance room as he kept his arms raised and hands in full view so that I could make sure he wasn't grabbing something en route. Then I unlocked the seance room, placed Kai in the cabinet. The other sitters were patted down before entering the room, and Julia was strip searched by Jochen's wife, Anna. So under red light, we got some video of Kai extruding ectoplasm coming out of his mouth. It showed separation and structure of the material. The material didn't smell. There was no evidence of the black tea that Kai had just before the seance, and no evidence of the recent meal that Kai had had. And next we saw some glowing green ectoplasm, which Kai spread apart, moved around, and brought within 2 inches of my face. But we did not get that on video. It was too dim. We made several attempts to record the massive material on the floor while it was breathing or flexing. The video wasn't great, but we did get some evidence of movement. And then finally, as he usually does, Kai showed himself covered from head to toe by a kind of netting or cocoon of ectoplasm, which we also recorded in very dim video. When the seance was over, I examined Kai in the cabinet once again and found nothing suspicious. Jochen strip searched Kai again and found nothing suspicious. Let me just very quickly show you some stills from the ectoplasm video, so we'll all be up to date. This is all very 19th century. Okay, look familiar to some of you? Now, recent developments. Here's where we are today. In the forthcoming, soon-to-be forthcoming, summer issue of the JSE, Michael Nahm, one of my Austrian co-investigators, presents a quite compelling circumstantial case for fraud in connection with some of Kai's phenomena, some light phenomena, and also some of his ectoplasmic manifestations. Michael's report and mine have now been pre-published, and you should have gotten a notice if you're an SSE member, and the actual issue will appear in a few weeks. So let me tell you about these suspicious phenomena. The light phenomena in question closely resemble what magicians produce by means of a device called the light flight. And these light phenomena had always struck some observers, including Jochen, as suspicious, and what tipped the scales was our being able to examine a sequence of photos that Jochen took, actually 2 sequences of photos, which made the trick quite obvious. I don't have permission to show you the full sequence, but I do have permission to show you one photo, and I can explain what's going on. The delight flight, or something like it, is controlled in one hand, and it makes a light move around somewhere nearby. It's an LED, presumably on the end of a fiber optic device, or something like that. And if you look at the light, can you see that? If you look at Kai's thumb, what you see in the sequence of pictures is that the light follows exactly the trajectory of Kai's thumb. And that's exactly how the delight flight or a device like it works. So Kai is simply moving the light, which appears to be resting in his hand, sometimes in his mouth, and it just moves along with his thumb. And the sequence of photos makes that absolutely clear. Now, here's what I did after we saw these photos. I had a conversation with Jochen, and I asked him flat out if Kai had ever confessed to having used a device like the Delight Flight. And Jochen hesitated, clearly not sure how to answer my question. So he actually never really answered it. He was struggling to figure out what to say. So I didn't push it any further, but it seemed to me that the conclusion was quite obvious. If Kai had not confessed to cheating, it would have been very easy for Jochen simply to say, no, Kai never confessed cheating to me. So what I inferred from that was that Kai had, in fact, confessed to having cheated and swore Jochen to keep that in confidence. And that put Jochen in the position, Jochen being an honorable guy, it put Jochen in the position of having to lie to one friend, me, to protect the confidence of another. And commendably, Jochen didn't know what to do. So I didn't push it any further. What I did instead was to have a Skype talk with Kai shortly thereafter. And I said to Kai, I know you've cheated with regard to at least these light phenomena. And I explained to him what happened when I talked to Jochen. Now, if Kai had thought that I had drawn an improper inference here, he could have easily protested. He didn't. Instead, he just apologized to me over and over, and for the first time in several years of Skype conversations, he couldn't look me right in the eye over the video. And he then made a bunch of vague and not altogether clear comments about the difference between public demonstrations of his mediumship and careful experimentations of the kind we did in Austria. So although Kai was careful not to say the words, yes, I cheated, and thereby confess, I consider what happened to be functionally equivalent to a confession. So clearly, this casts a shadow over the case as a whole, and what it shows is that at least sometimes Kai is only feigning being in a trance state. We also know that Kai purchased both a green luminous Halloween-style cobweb and non-luminous Halloween-style cobweb, and in quantities much greater than would be needed just to determine, as Kai claims, how closely it resembles the ectoplasm appearing in his cabinet sittings. And notice, that's 1 kilogram of cobweb. As we say in philosophy, that's a lot of fucking cobweb. And almost karmically, the internet vendor Kai bought this through was a person who'd attended a Felix group seance and thought Kai was a fraud. So this couldn't have made him happier. Now, Kai made a video, which he never posted, but he showed it to me, of some of his luminous cobweb, and in the video he claims it's unlike what appears during his seances. He also said that he heard about suspicions concerning the use of the cobweb back in 2012, and he seems to say that he produced the video clip at that time. But I know, because I've seen the invoices, that he purchased the 1 kilogram of non-luminous cobweb and a smaller amount of luminous cobweb in late 2013. So why did he need more if he had already satisfied himself? Now, let's not get carried away with skeptical enthusiasm, because it's true that much of the non-luminous ectoplasm I've seen looks more cloth-like and less synthetic than what Kai displays in his video. On the other hand, and I just go back and forth about all this stuff, Kai's luminous cobweb in the video looks exactly like the green material displayed in Austria. And besides, how would Kai know how similar the cobweb and the ectoplasm are if he's in a non-conscious trance state during the production of the ectoplasm? It seems, in fact, that sitters would be in a better position to compare the cobweb to the ectoplasm than Kai would be. Also, Michael Nahm has purchased different kinds of cobweb from the same vendor Kai used, and they look different from the material that Kai displayed in his video. But still, we have no smoking gun yet indicating that Kai smuggled the cobweb into the Austrian seance room, or a good idea even of how the material escaped our controls. But in light of Kai's obvious cheating on some occasions, this certainly doesn't look very good. I also have to say that most of the moving light phenomena I've observed are different from what can be produced by means of a device like the Delight Flight. Just to take one example, back in 2010, during a table tilting session recorded in high-res infrared video, there were some lights that were appearing and hanging around between my legs. These were the lights that notoriously were hovering around my testicles, which was provided an occasion for considerable hilarity. And since this was recorded in high-resolution IR video, if Kai had been deploying some device, it would have been very obvious in the video, but nothing seemed out of the ordinary. Now, a lot of people already, now that they know that Kai has been caught cheating, have, I think, gone overboard and argued that all the phenomena are fraudulent. But obviously, it's invalid to argue some of Kai's phenomena are fraudulent, therefore they're all fraudulent. That's about as compelling as arguing some money is counterfeit, therefore all money is counterfeit. We also know that some of the strongest cases of physical mediumship are, in fact, cases of mixed mediumship, where we see a combination of genuine and fraudulent phenomena. Of course, the difference between Kai's case and these other cases is that in the strong cases, the phenomena were produced under controls even better than those Kai permitted in Austria. Still, I mean, considering my strip search and examination of the clothing and so on, there are certain important questions that remain. For example, where did the Austrian ectoplasm come from? How did Kai get it into the room? And why did I find no traces of it after the seance? I mean, could Kai have hidden it in his rectum or in his gut? Also, if the Austrian cabinet manifestations were all fraudulent, if Kai was stashing all of this stuff in some orifice, he would have needed to stash at least two kinds of ectoplasm, the synthetic-looking stuff and the more cloth-like stuff, and whatever he was using to produce the bright lights we saw inside the cabinet. That's a lot of stuff to hide in one of his orifices. Now, on the other hand, we know that practitioners of a yogic system cleansing method called Dowdy swallow large amounts of cotton sheeting, and they keep it in their stomach for between 5 and 20 minutes. You just do an internet search on Dowdy. You can see that even housewives are learning to do this. On the other hand, Dowdy practitioners are warned against swallowing synthetic material, and also they're warned against drinking after ingesting the cotton. So it seems relevant that Kai drank a large quantity of iced tea just before leaving the strip search for the seance room. On the other hand, if Kai learned about the delight flight, then I think we have to be open to the possibility that he learned other tricks as well. And we can't forget that Kai gives seances, actually public demonstrations, with great frequency, and he seldom has a failure or a negative seance in which no or almost no phenomena occur. And that's quite remarkable, especially for a medium who claims, as Kai does, to be less prodigious than the greatest past mediums. And all the great past mediums had negative seances. In fact, D.D. Hume lost his powers for an entire year. And this would be especially remarkable for Kai, considering how exhausted he gets from traveling and from lack of sleep, and considering also that for us in Austria, he had a negative fourth seance, ostensibly because he was worn out by the previous 3 seances. On the other hand, if Kai was nothing but a cheat, then he could have used the darkness of the 4th Austrian seance to levitate a table. So why didn't he? Instead, nothing happened. So overall, I'd say nothing learned so far about Kai's cheating justifies our discounting either his table levitations or the object movements occurring under 4-limb bodily control. But obviously, current suspicions do warrant imposing tighter controls next time. So I've proposed to Kai that we meet again in Austria and impose tighter controls, but not necessarily heroic controls. I said to him, investigators should supply the cabinet. He was happy with that. He says he often travels without a cabinet. I suggested sewing him into a one-piece suit. He was okay with that. I actually even suggested a California version of this where we're all in the nude. I also proposed putting boxing gloves on his hands and sealing the boxing gloves, as was used in the Australian Charles Bailey case, and that he drink blueberry syrup or blueberry juice like Eva C. did. There's no need to insist that Kai swallow an emetic like Eva C. did or submit to a full cavity search. And besides, my philosophical training doesn't prepare me for that. So the next step is really up to Kai if he wants to salvage his reputation and make the kind of mark in the history of parapsychology that I think he originally wanted to do. So Robert, Jochen, and I are ready to meet with Kai again in Austria if he's willing and able to do it. So if you want to know where I now stand on all of this, my view from Mount Olympus is that Kai is at least a mixed medium. Some of his phenomena aren't yet adequately explained away or directly challenged by recent revelations. And nevertheless, the controls Kai's permitted still fall short of the gold standard for this type of investigation. If you want to know more about cases that have survived that kind of test, may I humbly recommend my book, The Limits of Influence. This is the book about which James Randi once said, "Never read it." There's sort of a Reader's Digest version of the cases of Dee Dee Hume and Eusapia Palladino in my book, The Gold Leaf Lady. And for a purely sleazy, opportunistic promotional comment, let me just say I have a new book coming out in a few weeks called Crimes of Reason. So thank you very much.
See there, the soap opera never ends. Just a quick lesson in microphonology. When you ask a question, hold the microphone about an inch away from your mouth and point it straight out, not down like this. You can't hear that way. All right. So.
Thank you, Steve. If he does allow you to do more seances, I would recommend that his wife does not act as a control and that you employ open-minded, investigators that have never met him, because that just always struck me as odd that the person who wants him to succeed the most in the world is the one holding that one side of his body. Just a suggestion.
Yeah, thank you for mentioning that. I should say that in Austria, Julia was not controlling him. She did not want to be a control for precisely that reason. Her role there was to control the CD player.
As a matter of curiosity, does Kai have any body piercings?
He has lots of tattoos. I'm not aware of any body piercings, no.
If he's been planning sleight of hand for some time, a body piercing, tattoo is slightly less plausible, might conceal some sort of surgically implanted pocket.
It would have to be, well, I mean, Kai is sufficiently Zoftic that I suppose he could have hidden something in the folds of his belly in that way, but I don't think that's where his tattoos are, based on my strip search.
The mixed tradition in healing is actually very prevalent, particularly in the Philippines or a lot of the shaman healers of Tibet, where they'll actually use pretending to pull something out or something, but they're actually really doing something significant underneath. And it could be that just the mention of it might bring some shame to him and made it more difficult to speak about it. Secondly, I think if he really were pulling something out of an orifice, especially with his larger statue that you mentioned, there might be some olfactory evidence that would have appeared that would have made that more obvious. But
yes, and I noted last year that, in fact, there was no olfactory evidence even when the ectoplasm was brought within a couple inches of my face. So I'd say, first of all, I have no problem with the fact that Kai's a mixed medium. From a business perspective, it makes good sense. From a psychological perspective, it can be reasonable also. I mean, if Kai is slipping in and out of trance, he might need something to fall back on. And I understand that it's one thing to have a negative seance for experienced investigators, especially after 3 successful seances. And it's another thing to disappoint paying customers who are loyal followers and are expecting miracles. Thank you.
I've seen it written that anybody that can do magic should be able to be strip searched, given a new change of clothing by the examiner, taken out into the middle of a field in broad daylight, and still be able to do the phenomenon. Why is darkness required in these episodes?
First of all, I don't know that that's really true, what you said, but I mean, if they have enough time to prepare it for themselves, that's fine. But the thing about our seances is that Kai doesn't have the kind of time to prepare things. But why is darkness required? There are all sorts of mythologies about what's necessary. And Kai is completely inconsistent about this. He says infrared prohibits the phenomena, but we've gotten things recorded in infrared. And besides, the red light that he uses to illuminate the phenomena generates more IR energy than the little beam from my Sony infrared camcorder. So Kai knows that darkness is not required. Kai knows that some of the greatest mediums have produced phenomena in good electric light or daylight. But his answer to that is he's not D.D. Hume, he's not Eusapia Palladino. Nevertheless, he almost never has a negative seance. Something is not right.
In the medical world, there's a procedure that's done, not always common, where to measure heart activity, they have people swallow an electrode and it's in the esophagus, and I've done, you go down the stomach and you tie it to the tooth, and they record for 24 hours. So I don't know, I think you need to possibly examine his mouth to see there's not something in the string going down that's got something in the stomach, because then you just pull it out afterwards.
Yeah, we plan to check his various cavities more carefully next time. At least I hope Jochen does.
Thank you very much, Dr. Brody. Excellent.
Thank you.